My name is Layla. I am a princess. I am 22 years old, and I have not spoken in 8 years. People say the sun never rises in our kingdom, but that is not true. It does rise, only in the eyes of strangers. For me, the sky has looked the same since the day my voice was stolen. Gray, wide, and cold. I was 14 when the silence began, and I have lived in it ever since. No sound escapes my mouth, not words, not even cries. I try, especially at night when I wake from dreams of fire and falling, but nothing comes, only my breath, shaking and useless. I remember the day the seer touched my throat with her fingers and said, "Now you belong to silence." That was the first time I knew what fear truly was, not just fear of pain or death, but the fear of being forgotten, of still being alive and yet already lost. The seer is not my mother, though she calls herself my guardian. She arrived when I was a baby, after my real parents vanished in a storm no one could explain. Some say she created the storm herself to steal the royal child. Others say the gods gave me to her as a test. I do not know which to believe, but I do know this. Nothing in her world is done without reason, and no act of kindness comes without a cost. She raised me in the high tower above the broken city, where the wind speaks more often than people do. I had everything except freedom. My room was filled with old books, soft cushions, and gold mirrors, but none of it mattered because I was not allowed to leave. I was her secret, her prize, the girl with the blood of rulers and a curse that kept her from asking why. Every few seasons, she made me sit by the wide glass window while strangers came to visit. They never knew I was there. They only saw her, Imara, the great seer of the eastern sands, standing with her long black robes and silver eyes. Some were kings, others rich merchants or travelers from faraway islands. They asked for her wisdom, offered gifts, and sometimes they asked about the girl in the tower. She would tell them it was a rumor, a fairy tale. "There is no princess here," she said. But then she would lead them through her garden, past the silver pool, and into the chamber of trials. I never saw what happened inside, but I always heard them scream. One morning, I woke before the sun. My bones felt cold, but not from weather. Something had changed in the air. I stood at the window and watched the path beyond the gate. The ground was dry, and the sand shifted in small waves. A traveler was coming. I saw his figure from far away, tall, covered in dust, walking alone. Most travelers came in wagons, with banners and servants. This one came as if no one knew he was coming, as if he did not want to be seen. That made my heart move in a way I did not understand. By midday, he reached the gates. I watched from behind the curtains as the seer met him. I could not hear their words, but I saw his eyes. They were dark, but not empty. There was something waiting inside them. I saw the way he stood, not proud, not afraid, but steady. He looked like someone who had already lost too much to be frightened by magic. I wanted to know his name. I wanted him to look up and see me. He did not. He followed the seer into the house, and I stood alone, wondering if he was already gone. That night, I could not sleep. I kept walking in circles in my room, holding the old pendant my real mother had left behind. It was small and round, with a single blue stone. I used to press it to my lips when I was younger, hoping it would somehow give me back my voice. It never did. But that night, I held it tightly and looked again through the window. The sky was heavy with stars. I thought of the traveler. I pictured him standing before the seer, answering her riddles, facing her tests. I did not know what she had asked of him, but I knew the seer never played fair. The next day passed in silence, as most days do. But in the afternoon, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Real footsteps, not servants, not soft like Imara's. Stronger, slower. They stopped outside my door. My heart beat so fast it felt like it would break my ribs. Then the door opened, and he was there. He did not look surprised to see me. He did not bow or speak. He just walked slowly into the room, as if he had been here before, in a dream or another life. I stepped back, unsure what he wanted, but he reached into his bag and held out something, a blue stone, my pendant. My eyes filled with tears, and I covered my mouth. It had fallen from my window last night, when I was not careful. He must have found it in the garden, and somehow he knew it mattered. He sat on the floor, cross-legged, and waited. For what? I did not know. I sat too, not far from him. We stayed like that for a long time. He did not ask me questions. He did not try to make me speak. He just stayed. That was the first kindness I had felt in years. And I knew then, this traveler was different. The next trial came the day after. I did not see it, but I heard the storm begin. It was not a natural storm. The seer called down wind and sand and darkness. I watched from the window as fire moved through the sky in circles. I thought he would die. I thought she would win again. But then I saw something impossible. The sand stopped moving. The fire faded. The winds changed direction. And he walked out of the storm alive. Behind him were 5 shadows, strange men with strange bodies. One had arms longer than tree branches. Another had eyes that glowed like glass. I did not know who they were or how he had found them, but they moved with him like old friends. Imara stood on the stone steps and watched in silence. She said nothing, but her hands were shaking. That night, she did not come to my room. She did not speak to the traveler. She locked herself in the tower and burned incense that smelled like blood. And I, for the first time in years, felt something dangerous inside me. Hope. Before I share the rest of my story, I need to know, where are you listening from? Knowing someone hears me, understands me, gives me strength. The day after the storm trial, I waited by the window again. The sky was clouded, not with weather but with worry. The seer had not spoken to me or to him. That was rare. She always greeted her challengers with pride, especially before their final test. But this time, she said nothing. Her silence made the air heavier than usual. I watched her from above as she walked through the courtyard with her head down and her hands hidden in her sleeves. Something in her had changed, and I had never seen her afraid. I did not know what his next test would be, but I knew it was coming. It always came on the third day. That was her rule. Her trials were meant to break the body, the mind, and finally, the heart. I waited through the morning, sitting near the glass that separated me from the world. I saw him walk alone, this time into the orchard behind the tower. The others, his strange companions, waited near the well. The one with glowing eyes stood still as stone, and the tall one with long arms picked fruit from trees he did not need to climb. They were not just helpers. They were his shield. Maybe they were his story. By midday, the seer called him again. I did not see it, but I heard the bell that only she rang. When that bell sounded, it meant the last trial had begun. My hands started to shake, and I pressed them to my mouth. I did not know why I was so afraid. He was not mine. I had never touched him, never heard his voice. But something deep in me, something old and soft, begged for him to survive. Later that evening, my door opened again. I turned quickly, thinking it was him. But it was one of the silent servants. A girl, younger than me, her eyes always lowered, handed me a small scroll with the seer's mark and left without a word. I unrolled it with careful hands. It said, "Prepare. Tonight, you will speak." I dropped the scroll. It could not be true. My voice was gone. It had been gone for years. What did she mean? Was it a trap? Or worse, was she planning to use magic to force sound from me? I had seen her do that to animals once, make them cry out in pain just to show she could. The thought of it made my stomach twist. As the sky turned dark, the servants came again. This time, they dressed me in a gown I did not choose, deep blue, the color of morning. My hair was brushed, my hands scented with jasmine oil. I looked like someone attending a funeral. Perhaps that was the point. They led me to the Chamber of Stars, a room I had only seen once before, when I was small and curious. Its ceiling was made of black glass, with tiny lights that moved like stars. The floor was marble, and in its center stood a single chair. The seer waited beside it. "You will sit there," she said without looking at me. I sat. Moments later, the traveler was brought in. He looked stronger than before, but also tired. His eyes met mine, and something passed between us. It was not a question or a smile. just the quiet understanding of two people who had waited too long to be seen. The seer stepped into the center and raised her hands. "This is your final trial," she said. "You must stay awake through the night. You must sit across from her and not close your eyes. If you fall asleep, she will disappear. Her spirit will break, and you will die." He nodded once. Then she left us. At first, the silence between us felt like a wall. I wanted to tell him not to trust her, not to drink anything she had touched, not to believe what she said. But I could not. My lips moved, but my voice stayed locked inside. Still, he seemed to understand. He did not reach for me. He just sat there, eyes open, breathing slow. The hours passed. He blinked often. I could see him fighting the weight in his body. I kept my eyes on his. I thought, if I can hold his gaze, he will stay with me. If I let go, he will fall. So I did not look away, not even once. But near midnight, his eyelids dropped. He caught himself and sat up straighter. I leaned forward, wishing I could cry out. My hands trembled. I wanted to shake him, to remind him I was still here. He smiled faintly, almost a whisper of a smile. Then he mouthed a word. "Almost." My heart ached. Then I saw the candle flicker beside him. The air shifted. He did not notice, but I did. The seer was near. She entered quietly, holding a glass of dark liquid. "You are thirsty," she said. "Drink." He took it without thinking. I wanted to scream. He drank. Moments later, his head began to tilt. His shoulders fell. His eyes closed. I rose from my chair. I tried to speak. I tried to cry. Nothing. He was falling asleep, and I was disappearing. Then I heard something. Not from outside. From me. A sound. My name. Not from my lips, but from somewhere deeper. I had not spoken in 8 years, but in that moment, my voice returned. I whispered, "Taryn." His eyes opened. The room shook. The stars above us flared bright, and the ground cracked beneath the seer's feet. She stumbled back, screaming. Light poured from the floor, and a wind rose from nowhere. Taryn stood, blinking, and reached for me. I took his hand. I could speak, and my name was the first word he ever heard from me. The chamber of stars faded into silence. The seer was gone. The candles had burned down to nothing. Only the faint glow from the glass ceiling kept the room from total darkness. Taryn and I stood hand in hand, breathless, uncertain if what had just happened was real. My voice still lingered in the air between us, soft and alive. I wanted to say more, to speak all the words I had stored in silence for 8 years, but for now, it was enough that I could say his name. We stepped out of the chamber and into the long hallway. It smelled of ash and dust. The palace was too quiet, as if the magic that once pulsed through its walls had begun to sleep. Taryn didn't speak, but he led me gently toward the garden. The night air cooled my skin, and I felt the weight of the tower behind me. The other companions were waiting beneath the stone archway, the man with long arms, the one with eyes like mirrors, the silent one with sharp ears, and two others I hadn't noticed before. They nodded at me, not with surprise, but with respect, as if they had always known who I was. The garden was lit by moonlight, and the silver pool in the center reflected our faces. I caught my reflection and almost didn't recognize myself. My eyes looked brighter, my shoulders straighter. I was still wearing the deep blue gown, but I no longer felt buried in it. I was not dressed for mourning anymore. I was dressed for truth. Taryn turned to me. "You spoke," he said. His voice was steady, gentle. "You called my name." I nodded slowly. "I didn't know I could." He smiled. "I knew you could. I heard it before. In a dream." My eyes filled with tears again, but this time they weren't from pain. "How did you find me?" I asked. "Why did you come here?" He paused. The others were silent too. Then he said, "Because long ago, before I was born, my mother was cursed by the same seer. She lost her memory and wandered the deserts. But before she vanished, she wrote one name in her journal. Just one. Layla." I stared at him. "Your mother knew me?" He shook his head. "She said it was the name of the girl who would break the silence." The wind stirred the water beside us. I didn't know what to say. I had thought my story began with the storm that took my parents. But maybe it began long before. Maybe I was not cursed by accident. Maybe I had been hidden for a reason. Just then, the tower shook. A low rumble came from the ground. The seer's voice echoed across the garden, deeper than thunder. "You think you are free?" she shouted. "You think one broken curse changes everything?" We turned and saw her at the top of the stairs, robes flying, her eyes no longer silver but burning red. In her hands, she held a black staff that hummed with power. Behind her, the sky grew darker, and clouds moved unnaturally fast. She raised the staff, and lightning split the night. It struck the edge of the garden, burning the flowers to ash. "Run," Taryn said quietly. But I didn't move. "I'm tired of running," I whispered. The seer descended the stairs with unnatural speed. The earth cracked beneath her feet. The companions stepped in front of us, forming a shield, but she lifted her hand and sent them flying with a blast of energy. Taryn pulled me behind him. "You don't have to fight her," he said. "We can escape." "No," I said. "I do." I stepped out from behind him. The seer's eyes locked onto mine. "You speak now?" she hissed. "You think that makes you powerful?" "No," I said calmly. "It makes me real." She screamed and raised the staff again, but before she could strike, I lifted my pendant, the blue stone, and held it to my lips. "This belonged to my mother," I said. "You couldn't silence her, and you won't silence me." The stone began to glow. Light poured from it, not bright and sharp, but soft and golden. It wrapped around me like a cloak. The seer shouted again, but her voice began to crack. Her magic twisted, failed. The ground beneath her turned to dust. "No," she cried. "You are mine." I shook my head. "Not anymore." The light burst outward, and the tower behind her split in two. The air filled with the scent of flowers. The clouds disappeared. When the light faded, the seer was gone. Not dead, but vanished, as if the magic that held her together had finally let go. Taryn ran to me. "Are you all right?" "I think so," I said. The companion slowly stood, brushing off dirt and leaves. The man with long arms grinned. "I think she won't be bothering anyone again." The silent one nodded. "The tower is falling." We all looked back. The walls were crumbling. The glass windows shattered. But I felt no fear. The prison was ending, and with it, the part of me that had lived in shadow. We left the ruins behind and walked until morning. When the sun rose, I saw it for the first time in years. Not behind glass, not from a tower, but standing free in the open. It was beautiful. Later, Taryn and I reached the nearest village. People stared when they saw us. Some recognized the pendant. Others whispered the name Princess. I didn't correct them. For once, I didn't feel like a prisoner in a story I couldn't control. I felt like someone who had returned from silence, someone with a voice worth hearing. Taryn never left my side. And though I had many questions about his mother, about his journey, about the future, we walked together without speaking much. Some silences are gentle, not like the ones I lived with before. I still dream of the tower sometimes. I still feel the echo of those lost years. But now, when I wake, I breathe deep and whisper my name. Not because I need to remember who I am, but because I finally can.